conceptual perspective to view things. People talk about a desire to be successful, all of the elements.
Hello, everybody. Dr. Wallace dropping in on you. I hope that everybody, all things considered, you've gotten your day off to a good start. You're in a good space and you're doing well. I have done as much as I possibly can, all things considered, to share some of the information that I've uncovered and researched to provide perspective to what we're going through, to try to provide some guidance. And I haven't really did a whole lot of videos on Facebook. Most of the things that I've addressed via video format has been done for my YouTube channel. But I wanted to take some time here. This will eventually make it to other platforms like YouTube and some others. But I wanted to do this live here because there is a lot of information flowing around and there are some concerns that I have. And I want to at least do my part to try to provide some sense of lucidity as to what's happening. As a human behavioral specialist, someone who focuses and understands why people do what they do and how it impacts society as a whole, I focus on what I see and observe people doing and how it will impact people based off of historical observation, empirical data, and other informational outlets to gain an understanding of what's happening. I have posted on multitudinous occasions since this kicked off that we have to be careful in overreacting, especially leaning towards the reactive response of panic and the reasons why we shouldn't panic. I have used the model of placing previous incidences that are in some way have a comparative nature in juxtaposition to what we're going through now, to provide some relativity to gain an understanding of the severity of what we're dealing with in comparison to previous experiences along the same lines. I shared something that made a comparison to the common flu. I'm looking at some numbers from the common flu now. Since October 1st, 2019 until March 14, 20, there have been an estimated 54 million illnesses in the US associated with the flu. Another 25 million visits to the doctor, 710,000 hospitalizations, and it's anywhere from 23,000 to 59,000 deaths. That's just in this flu season. This is presented. This is comes from what is known as the preliminary in-season 2019-2020 burden estimates offered by the CDC. I have shared that not for the purpose of saying to ignore what we're dealing with the coronavirus. That would be foolish. My family and I are observing precautions. We are taking the necessary steps to protect ourselves, but we are not panicking. We are not running around, and we're not begging to surrender constitutional rights that we fight and bleed for so drastically based on numbers that don't support it. Now, understanding we're in an infancy stage of understanding this virus. So we also have a limited number of tests available. So the unit of analysis, so to speak, of understanding or studying this virus is still relatively small. So we don't really know on a grand scale how it's going to end up behaving and what it will eventually respond to. So there's a certain uncertainty of how this will turn out, but based off of the numbers we have to be cognizant of how we respond. A lot of people, I've had some people come in, and the reason I'm making this video is for this purpose. I've had some people come in and suggest that I'm a little too casual or calm in the way I address it, that even though I'm stating I'm following the suggested guidelines of protecting myself and my family, that I'm too calm. And because I'm too calm or cavalier, it leads people to take a calm or cavalier approach. And my thing is, again, as a behavioral specialist, I definitely understand human behavior and how the human mind, human brain operates. First and foremost, panic is a stress response. When you have a stress response, you limit the capacity of the brain that functions to produce executive function, executive performance. Executive function is everything from decision-making, reasoning, rationale, impulse control. All of these things are things performed by the prefrontal cortex or the frontal lobe of the brain, and it is what allows you to make good decisions, to not do stupid stuff, and blah, 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 blah. When you panic, you rob that part of the brain of oxygen, because panic is a stress response. Stress responses are known more affectionately as fight or flight, meaning that you get a heightened sense of immediate response, an immediate need for a response or a reaction. Your heartbeat starts to increase. Your palms get sweaty. The blood flow stops flowing. 30% of your brain requires 30% of your oxygen at any given time. It has the highest demand for oxygen. However, when you have a stress response, that changes, and the blood flow moves from the brain to the extremities, the arms and the legs. Why? Fight or flight. It is one of the most primitive responses that you have as a human being. It was designed millions of years ago to protect, however long ago, to protect from the harms and dangers of what were out in the world at the time. As we have evolved, we have moved more and more away from the threat of daily physical harm, unless you live in some of the more impoverished areas of the nation. You're not walking out of the house and literally thinking, I could die today. That was the case when this part of the brain ruled. We have evolved in our thinking and our needs and our abilities to make decisions and the requirements to do so. And in that sense, we as a people, collectively and individual, will make better decisions when we're calm. Being calm does not mean you're ignoring the facts in front of you. It means that you will not allow the facts in front of you to disrupt you, to put you in a position where you become frenetic and unglued to the point that you panic, you gain anxiousness, you become anxious, and you develop anxiety, and you limit your ability to make proper decisions. You become foolish in your decision making, and you see it in the panic. A lot of people, and here's the thing, the powers that be understand that. If they want you to do something that you would not likely do, all they have to do is make you afraid that if you don't do it, you could be in danger. And you start to say, okay, take this freedom, take that freedom, as long as you protect me. David Rockefeller said it in the early 70s, that it would be fear and panic that ushered in a new world order. He said it big as day. And my thing is, you can make so many decisions to protect yourself. You can make so many decisions. The thing is, if you're in your house and you're not allowing anybody to come in your house, and you don't have COVID-19, the chances of you at this particular time getting it are pretty much nil. So the increase in contact can be controlled. The increase or the decrease in human contact can be controlled by you. So you don't need to surrender or panic You simply need to make better choices, and you can do that better when you don't panic. When you panic, you make poor decisions. It's period. It's scientifically proven. There's so much pragmatic and empirical data out there that supports this. This isn't something I came up with in my mind, but it is an area of my expertise. Traumatic experiences, traumatic memory, epigenetics, adverse childhood experiences, complex trauma are the areas I operate in, and the healing thereof, and from that, and understanding how we put ourselves in the position. I'm also an expert in understanding how situations like this will impact your health outside of COVID-19. Do you understand that you have a psychological, emotional, and physical environment that you create for yourself daily by the way you think, by your level of stress that you experience, by how much you are in a panic? And as you experience more panic, as you experience more stress, as you experience more anxiety, you upregulate disease genes. Diseases like cancer, diseases like um, uh, cancer, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, all these things are literally genetically controlled, and they increase by way of environmental influence. And you create the environment, not just in your surroundings, but in your thinking, in your nutritional intake, in your expectations, and in a number of other ways. You are creating an environment. We now know through scientific research and the compilation of the data from these studies that when you create the optimal environment, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, physiologically, and even spiritually, on an energy level, or you're literally, monitoring the frequency you're emitting and creating, which can be measured literally scientifically, that you increase your capacity when you reach the highest pinnacle and levels in each of these categories. You increase the ability of your body to heal itself. In other words, a great deal of the pain and the suffering of this world is based off of emotional environment and human thought. This is scientifically proven. When I share this, I am not making light of a situation, because I am at the same time doing the best I can to understand it and to be responsible in how I address it. You have never heard me say ignore it. You have never heard me say it doesn't exist. You have never heard me say just go out and be you and do you. I'm saying take the necessary precautions, but refrain from the panic. The panic will, please understand me, there's so much historical data to back what I'm about to say. The panic will cause more devastation and harm than the disease or the virus ever will. Panic and pandemonium will collapse a global economy. See it happening. That was panic. That wasn't the disease. That was the fear of the disease that panicked. That panic created this global collapse. Panic will eventually cause people to turn on one another. Panic will cause social creatures to stop being social, thereby limiting our impact and our effectiveness as a people, as a human race, and individually as groups. I don't have the foresight to sit up and say at what point and what time humanity will meet its end. That's beyond my scope. It's not something that I give a lot of consideration to. I give more consideration to how I will live than how I will die. And that's what I teach my clients. However, what I can tell you is I'm going to assume, based on the historical data that I have, that I research, that is just in massive abundance, that COVID-19 is not going to be the virus that takes out the world. Now, it is proven based on the fear more than the virus itself that it will definitely change how things are done from this point on. But that's more based off of the propaganda and the push of information and the desire to. Have you ever noticed that right when we thought something, there was always a media push to change the narrative to a more scary idea? I remember there was no, when there were no reports of Black people contracting the disease, and then you couple that with the fact that Africa is the most unimpacted continent on the planet, and people start drawing the conclusions that it doesn't impact people of African descent. And immediately, all of a sudden, you start seeing a lot of Black people pop up saying they had it. Wasn't an accident. It was a purposeful push. I'm not saying none of the people who said they didn't have, that said they had it, didn't have it. What I'm saying is watch how the media is responding to some of the postulations that mitigate the fear. Whenever something pops up to mitigate the fear, there's a counter response by mainstream media to ensure that the fear is reinstated. What am I getting at? Well, I'm getting at this. You have a responsibility to take care of you and those you love. I'm looking at the numbers now, and this happens every year. Like I said, 38 to 54,000 illnesses since October. No, I'm sorry, 38 million to 54 million illnesses in the US alone from the flu since October. 17 million to 25 million medical visits, meaning it was serious enough to visit a doctor. 390,000 to 710,000 hospitalizations. 23,000 to 59,000 deaths associated with the flu. Now, here's why you have the variance between the 390,000 to 710, the 23,000 to 59,000, because just because they had the flu, it doesn't mean that they died from complications to the flu. Now you have to also make that same comparison to the associated deaths that are being made with the coronavirus. What you have are a lot of real-time numbers, right? Especially coming out of places like Italy, where these numbers are pretty huge and scary. 775 people in one day, right? Another 750 or 40, 745 the day before. And they're talking about the numbers. What we cannot really truly ascertain from those numbers is that they actually died from the coronavirus. You cannot do the autopsies that quick. You cannot make an assessment that quick, especially when 99% of them had pre-existing conditions. What we know is they contracted the virus, and after contracting the virus, they died. What we cannot say with certainty is that they died because they had the virus. We're talking about a bunch of elderly people who contracted something and had a lot of other conditions. Could the coronavirus have been a cause? Absolutely. So what we are automatically postulating and assuming is because they had the virus, they died from the virus. And what we're going to find out is that in many cases, that's not what actually will be the case. We're going to find out. We found out that as many as 50% of the positives on tests are false positives now. These are things that we're going to have to get. When you are getting all of these real-time reports, you can't have all the variables at play and understood and evaluated. So a lot of what you're getting is brought on postulation and a lot of reports. And it's in something else I noticed is that when people are reporting deaths, that there's this emphasis on the reports that are making it to the news. And I think I forgot how many people have died so far. It's not thousands, but how many people have died so far in the US. And the ones that are making it to the report where you're actually hearing about their deaths, there are articles being written. Every last one of them has this in the article so far that I've seen. I could be wrong. That they had no pre-existing conditions. And you have to ask yourself why. Because when you actually do the research and you start to look at the people who are dying from this, the vast majority do have pre-existing conditions. So why is it that the ones that are making the news don't? Because they want people who may actually believe that they are not going to really be at risk of dying from it, to develop a fear. Now, here's the thing that I use to put things in perspective for people who aren't necessarily, based off of what we know about this virus, at high risk for developing any real serious complications. I'm almost certain that even if you aren't at risk, you know someone who could be, that you could ultimately end up around. Be a carrier or a host, meaning you're asymptomatic, not presenting symptoms, and yet be a carrier who can actually pass on the thing. So you should definitely still be protecting yourself, still be taking the necessary precautions to protect yourself. But that still does not require you to be in a state of panic. If you happen to be a person who studies the Bible, Christian or not, there's so much in there. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and of sound mind. There's a reason for that. There's another one that says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything through prayer and supplication, make your requests known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds. Now, hearts and minds, as we see it in the Bible, if you break it down and you put it in the plain, common, everyday knowledge, is your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. Your mind in the Bible, which is nous in the Greek, is your conscious mind. Your heart in the Bible, which is leib in Hebrew, cardia in Greek, is the center of your soul, or as we would talk about it now, your subconscious. We know now that your subconscious mind controls 96 to 97% of your complete behavior. Your total behavior is controlled subconsciously. That's where you get the scripture, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, because 96 to 97% of everything we do, say, and how we live is controlled by our subconscious behavior. We're on autopilot from what we've uploaded into our mind. But so when you look at the Bible, then it's, in addition to that, there's another one in one of Paul's letters to the church in Corinth, where he sits up and he tells them that though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh, but the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for the pulling down of what? Strongholds. Casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against. Casting down. In other words, control your thinking. Over and over again, with the exception of knowing the word, the most common command in scripture is to guard your hearts and minds. And there's a reason for that. When you don't guard your heart and mind, you subject yourself to the influences, external influences of other stimuli. You're responsible for what enters and takes place in your heart and mind. And so what I'm trying to get you to understand is that you don't have to be in a panic to care. You don't have to be in a panic to be on your game. You don't have to be in a panic and frenetic and unglued to take the right precautions. As a matter of fact, the more calm you are, the better decisions you're gonna make. Anybody that's ever been in combat, no matter where you're at, in the hood, in military battle, those who maintain their heads are the ones you want leading and the ones most likely to survive. When you panic under duress, you subject yourself to failure because it robs your ability to think. The part of your brain responsible for executive function doesn't function well in panic, anxiety, and fear. So this is what I'm saying. Put yourself in a situation where you can properly consume information, compare information, analyze information. The more you learn about what's going on, the less fearful you will be. There are certain things in life you are simply not going to be able to control. And if you lose your bearing, if you lose your head, life is going to simply be this long, drawn out experience of victimization because you refuse to take control and understand things. This is the reality that so many people face in any situation. And now that we're facing this uncertainty, It's going to be the people who are able to get a grasp on what's going on and make a conscious decision of how they're going to respond to it that's going to fare the best in it. You go back to the collapse of the economy in the 30s, which is known as the Great Depression. It was the people who were able to respond and not react that came out of it in a better economic situation. The worst economic reality at that time in the history of the country and in so many other ways led to more millionaires being created at that time than any other time in the past combined. And it happened again in the 1990s. It happened again in 2007. In other words, you have the ability to respond to things, or you react to things. When you react, you lose the control and the personal sovereignty to take hold of opportunities that present themselves in the midst of chaos. So no, I am not promoting a cavalier, casual response to this. I'm promoting a calm, calculated, and precise response based off of all of the information, not just what's being spoon-fed and force-fed to you to produce a certain reaction that does not benefit you. You have to be willing to really look at this thing through the lens of how we have been dealt with over time in this country and around the world, and understand that there are things at play that we don't want to admit because it messes with the illusion of comfort, the illusion of security and safety. The truth of the matter is there are games being played on levels the vast majority of the public has no idea of, because we want to believe that we are the moral compass for the world. We want to believe that everything that we do is absolutely right and that the world is against us because we are so morally superior. We want to believe all of that without realizing that we probably live in a country that has interfered and messed with everybody else's business while their own business suffers. And they've done it for years. And there are simply going to be things that happen. There's a follow. There's a reason why Americans aren't liked, and it ain't because we are Americans. It's because that the country we live in tends to be in everybody else's business, while hypocritically not handling their own. And if we don't ever want to grasp that, we're never truly going to be able to see what's taking place and why. With that being said, look, I'm going to get out of here. But I just had to address that because going back and forth and trying to type all this stuff was taking up too much time. Again, you can take care of yourself. You can protect you and your family without fear. You can do that without panic. You can do that without anxiety. And you're actually going to do a better job of it when you take control of your thoughts, when you manage your thinking, when you calm yourself down. You don't have to be in a panic to care. That's a mindset with my people that scares me, is that if you're not panicking, if you're not throwing a fit, if you're not running around screaming and hollering and yelling, you don't care. No, I am just never going to be in a panic. Panic doesn't do anything but reduce my ability to respond. And I refuse to operate that way. I'm going to operate off of information. I'm going to make decisions off of my ability to acquire knowledge about whatever decision I need to make. And I'm going to live with the decisions. Sometimes I'm not going to be spot on, and sometimes I'm going to be wrong. But the vast majority of the time, being that I'm going to be willing to put in the time, energy, and effort to learn about what I'm talking about and what I'm observing and the decisions that need to be made, that I'm going to make a pretty good decision, because I'm going to be looking at the preponderance of the facts and not solely looking at it from one perspective. On that note, I'm going to get out of here. You guys have a great day. The acquisition of some skills that are in high demand as the workforce evolves. We are offering training and courses in a number of skill sets that will be in high demand in this particular decade. From 2020 to 2030, we already know that there's going to be plenty demand for
formal education in the way of a degree of any kind, but just the skill sets that you can demonstrate. Some are copywriting, coding, UI design, public speaking, data management, content creation, digital advertising. That's another one. We are offering courses that are from 6 months to a year at the Vision Aids Institute for people.
Here I come, ready or not. Frank Ocean made this record hot.
From a conceptual perspective, people talk about it as
I ain't throwing shots. Careful who you